Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we gather today. I pay my respects to the elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people. Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we face many challenges. The challenge of human migration and refugee camps as shown here. The challenges that climate change poses, next slide please, as a result of carbon dioxide emissions. And the next slide, I cannot stress this matter enough given your recent bushfires, the warming oceans and the rising sea levels. Next slide please. The challenges of a consumer society as exemplified by the problem of plastic contamination of the oceans, waterways, food chains, and humans. This demands consideration of a circular economy or upcycling of plastics. The next slide, please. The medical, societal, and economic challenges posed by the present COVID-19 pandemic and the disruptions that we are all experiencing. All that set against a geopolitical backdrop that is changing daily, sometimes hourly. Next slide, please. Research cuts across geographical and political boundaries. Its discoveries can not only lead to improved lives, but as the Green Revolution showed, it can certainly save lives. Unfortunately, almost 60 years after the Green Revolution, we still face the problem of eradicating hunger, and we are facing the prospect of even greater food insecurity as in the near future. So where do we go from here? Next slide, please. When governments convened in Rio de Janeiro in 2012 for the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, they developed the Sustainable There we go. So one shows no poverty or extending all the way to number 17, partnerships for the goals. So let me elaborate briefly. Next slide, please. SDG 2, no hunger. I would say is a direct challenge to the research community as well as to policymakers. Researchers have the expertise and drive to propose solutions to policymakers on how to eradicate hunger and address food insecurity, in the same way that the technologies of the Green Revolution prevented what could have been a world crisis. It is also important to stress that the 17 SDGs are interconnected and are a bold reminder that global challenges do not exist in silos. The next slide, please. When we talk about hunger, we're not just talking about the lack of availability of food sources. We're also talking about SDG 13, climate change and its impacts on biodiversity and agricultural food production, SDGs 14 and 15. We are talking about SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, as shown here, so that rural populations also have healthy and sound livelihoods, and cities are not inflicted with urban density challenges, including high rates of unemployment, resource scarcity, and urban slums. This links to SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, asking governments and private sector to support our farmers, not just with subsidies, but with best practices and sustainable technologies to continue production without stresses on the environment. The next slide. Clean water. SDG 6. Clean water and sanitation. Water is perhaps one of the rarest resources we have. It's hard to think of it this way, given that water covers 70% of our planet, but only 3% of the world's water is fresh water. The UN estimates some 1.1 billion people worldwide lack access to water. The International Decade for Action, Water for Sustainable Development, 2018 to 2028, is accordingly calling for attention to water as critical for sustainable development and the eradication of poverty, hunger, food security, and to ensure proper nutrition. The next slide. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Projections reveal increased intensity of droughts, which will take place within the next 30 to 50 years. I don't need to expand on the severe impacts this will have on food production and our societies, but I can certainly promote the value and arguably the urgent necessity to build linkages between research, policy, and civil society to start a new revolution. A revolution that will provide solutions to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change so that food security and its multiplier effects is not in global jeopardy. So how should we proceed? I maintain that we need to embrace diversity. Next slide, please. In all its dimensions and educate global citizens. Sustainability is a core value of Griffith University and a key initiative of the 2020-2025 strategic plan, creating a future for all. Griffith is a signatory to the United Nations Global Compact and to the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, university's commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Griffith is also a member of the Australian campuses towards sustainability, supporting and promoting best practices in sustainable operations, teaching, and research in higher education. Our teaching, research, and engagement programs are already closely aligned with each of the 17 UN global goals. By 2025, Griffith's commitments to and continuous improvement in sustainability will be achieved by implementing the SDGs throughout the university, being ranked in the top 200 universities in the world for the implementation of the SDGs, and having carbon emissions by 2030, with the goal, a lofty goal, of zero carbon emissions by 2050. Communication about, understanding of, and staff and student engagement with the SDGs, therefore, is critical to achieving our strategic goals. It is significant that Griffith was just chosen as one of the 80 UN Millennium Fellows campus for 2020 based on our growing contribution to the UN SDGs, the only university in Australia and the wider Oceania region. 17 Griffith students have been selected as UN Millennium Fellows, and they plan to work with our campus community, including other students, on 9 social impact projects. Within this strategic plan, we are in an open process to develop the research and innovation plan. Next slide, please. Which embraces the tenets of creativity, collaboration, diversity, and dialogue. Next slide. Illustrates creativity as exemplified by the assembly of parts of plastic chairs here to give something extraordinary, something beautiful, an image of a bowhead whale. Next slide. Collaboration. as exemplified here in this assembly of knives, spoons, and forks, which upon proper illumination render a beautiful sculpture of this motorcycle. Next slide indicates diverse dialogue. And this, I think, is absolutely essential that we keep in mind the importance of dialogue. This involves talking, but also listening closely to the needs and ideas of others. We must truly redouble efforts and meaningful dialogue with one another, and so I'm very pleased to participate in this forum. In my mind, we have lost one of the most precious attributes, the art of dialogue. We have gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. Next slide, please. Diversity. This taps into a spectrum of genders, cultures, perspectives, ideas, and activities to achieve our outcomes. Diversity brings different points of view and increases the power of the line of sight. This in turn leads to improved vision. In my view, embracing different approaches to shared values is the key to major advances in this world. It is an uncertain world, divisive at times, with heightened sensitivities about cultural, ethnic, religious, economic, and political differences. But make no mistake, diversity helps reduce unconscious bias and assumptions that may lead to incomplete analysis and faulty conclusions, and in so doing generates significant value. A McKinsey study determined that in industry, gender and ethnic diversity produce better decisions and better communications across teams, and significantly resulted in greater economic benefits. Next slide, please. So with this strategy, we hope to achieve the overarching goal of the Research and Innovation Plan, impact. And that is what we will strive for, global impact. This is our own Libby Trickett, the Olympic gold medalist. A significant aspect of the plan, next slide please, is the installation of the beacons and spotlights, overarching interdisciplinary collaborations that bring together diverse expertise to form these spires of excellence superimposed on a strong disciplinary foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, as I have often said, the future starts now through dialogue, diversity, creativity, and collaboration. We have the tools to be able to think about and do something in a new and disruptive way. And embedded in the plan are the SDGs. In the next year, next slide please, we will focus on 4 of the UN SDGs shown here, informed by our strengths, to put our application forward for ranking in the Times Higher Education SDG Impacts Ranking. And it is paramount, next slide please, that we never lose sight of the ultimate UN goal: no one left behind. The next slide please. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention, and I'd be pleased to answer any of the questions that you might have. Thank you again. The first question from an anonymous is understanding that Griffith University is signatory of the UN Global Compact. Does Griffith University have representatives that regularly participate in the UN Global Compact meetings, including the one held recently this year? This question, because I've just arrived at this university a few months ago, I'm going to have to deflect to Rob if he is on the line. No, I'm sorry, Rob is not here on the line. I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of that question. What is Griffith's stance on new buildings containing green rooftops, even culinary type gardens to help with food for our cafes and our students who might be struggling to afford healthy food? This is a very good suggestion, and a very ambitious goal. But as we plan at the moment for our new buildings, dictated by financial resources, we should certainly keep this suggestion in mind. In my personal previous lives, I have had experience with exactly this, and a very worthwhile endeavor. So we will keep you posted on this. How can students help implement the SDGs at uni? As I said, the Millennium Fellows will be reaching out to different students to help them on their 9 panel projects. And I think you can get involved, but on a smaller scale, with day-to-day activities in terms of recycling, in terms of promoting the word. I think that's the best one can do. Education is at the heart of all of this, and I think the more you can talk it up, the better. So don't take anything for granted. Even the smallest gesture can make a very big difference. So again, we will point you to different opportunities to get involved as we amplify our efforts. Rob has contributed an answer here. The point of contact for the Global Compact is the Center for Sustainable Enterprise Director, Rob himself, and Rob is located in the business school. So I think you can reach out to him, but it's clear to both Rob and me that we need to advertise our association more widely with the Global Impact, and we will be doing so. So thank you for that suggestion. How does Griffith measure its progress with the SDGs? Very good question, because we should be held accountable. Monitoring of energy usage, for example, and we did exactly that through the COVID-19 crisis. Energy consumption moving towards sustainable practices, and monitoring our degree of recycling and other practices. Rob, feel free to add a note in your comments, but a very good point. We should be held accountable as we move forward with this agenda. Independently, of course, we will be evaluated by the Times Higher Education exercise in an international format, and that too will hold us to account. Next question is, how is the goal of carbon neutral achieved by the university? Are emissions of Tier 3 considered? And I just spoke to this. I think, yes, absolutely. Reducing our carbon footprint in addition by controlling travel will be another significant factor, and sustainable practices in general will contribute to carbon neutrality. As I said, it's a lofty goal to get to complete carbon neutrality by 2050. This is not going to happen by chance. It's going to take significant work on all our parts. Are there any courses or workshops on the SDGs at Griffith? Again, I'm going to shift that question to Rob to give more detailed information. Opportunities for students to become more involved with Griffith sustainability. And for this 5-year plan, I'm approaching graduation and would love to know if there are any job opportunities in this area or who to reach out to. Please reach out to Rob or to me directly, and we can certainly make sure that you're engaged even post-graduation, because we can use all the help we can get in different quadrants as you move into different professions and different walks of life. So please feel free to reach out to us and to find out how you can participate with this 5-year plan. Next, regarding the SDGs, what specific activities are being undertaken to address the mentioned SDGs, and how are these being monitored and reported? So, good question. For the 4 SDGs we've chosen, clearly the first job is fact finding and fact checking, and that has already begun. We have a team hard at work on doing exactly that, collecting data, because without data, it's going to be very difficult to make a case. I am very fond of saying that data is not the plural of anecdote, and this holds true here as well. We really do have to have data that stands up to scrutiny, because this will have to be scrutinized by the international community and Times Higher Education as they examine if we reach the bar or if we surpass the bar with respect to each of our 4 goals. So I think absolutely we will be monitoring our practices following accumulation of data to set our baselines and monitoring progress relative to those baselines. There's a note from Kimberly. Any students who are interested in joining the Millennium Fellows for this year, we would love to have you on board. Please feel welcome to reach out to us. Sorry, not a question, but much appreciated, Kimberly. Thank you for that offer. Anonymous says, how can researchers pitch their research on SDGs? Who do they go to? And will there be specific SDG scholarships for postdoctoral research? Interesting question. The first part of the questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us, and Rob and I will try and direct you to more focused research organizations, focus groups, seminars, and so on, so that you may join that. Interesting question about postdoctoral fellows. As you know, the Griffith postdoctoral fellows are awarded on a competitive basis. They're currently very scarce because of our financial situation at the moment. This year, we will only be able to fund 12 of those postdoctoral fellows, again on a competitive basis. We have not pre-assigned in this particular competition, because it's so tight, a postdoctoral fellowship in the area specifically of the Sustainable Development Goals. Having said that, we are hopeful that many of the applications coming forward will embed within that research endeavor the SDGs. And I am very optimistic that that will happen. I should add that we have dedicated one of those postdoctoral fellowships specifically to Indigenous research, and I'm hoping that within that stream as well, we will see a reflection and a embracing of the SDG values. The next question is, how can staff help implement the SDGs at the uni? I've addressed that somewhat, but we will give you greater direction, and Rob and I will take that as an action item for both of us, and we will communicate with you on how you can participate better. How can Griffith staff and students support the university in the SDG ranking process? I think this comes back to the data gathering exercise. And if you can help us by reaching out to our panel members, we need all hands on deck, clearly, as we collect these data. And so you can perform a very important role by doing exactly that. So please reach out to me directly or to Rob, and we can connect you with our panel members. In your opinion, which SDG will be the most difficult to achieve? You know, all of these are admirable, and they're all pressing needs. It's difficult to give a pat answer because I'm very conscious that we operate within a geopolitical context where even food and water can be used as political weapons. And so the whole issue of food security, the whole issue of water for all, is not straightforward and is not purely a research matter. So there are other factors that play into this agenda. So we have to make sure that we transcend those geopolitical contexts and stay true to the mission of providing food security. So in my mind, food security is one of the most important, water security as well, but that reaches out. And as I said, those 17 SDGs are connected, that reaches out to peace and justice. And I should have mentioned that our first Beacons proposal was in the area of climate action with the underlying theme of social justice. And I think that is one of the most important things we could achieve, social justice for all, so that we don't take social license and so that we leave no one behind. The next question, again, as anonymous, which SDGs are easiest to achieve? Oh, again, difficult question. I don't think any of these are easy because of what I've just said. I don't leave anything to chance. I always look out for the unpredictable. And so I would not like to reach out and say any of these is easy to achieve. I think we're going to have to work very hard at achieving all of them. Have you seen any examples in your experience of universities around the globe who are exemplars for building sustainable campuses that meet the SDG criteria? That comes to us from Danielle. Thank you for the question, Danielle. In my previous life, I was Vice President of Research and Innovation at Simon Fraser University on the west coast of Canada, British Columbia. And this was exactly one of the missions that we took on over 20 years ago to convert one of our campuses, which resembles a great deal the Nathan campus at Griffith, surrounded by woods, into a sustainable campus with a sustainable city. This took several years. We lost forest land, that was the downside, but in its place we built a sustainable city, incorporated sustainable practices, where everything is recycled and people really make bids for those condos and purchase those condos because they know that they will be part of a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle choice. So this development is called University with a C. It's like Frank Sinatra with a C. I did not choose the name, but it's a shining example of what can be done in terms of a sustainable city. I will highlight two features within that sustainable city, a childcare center and an elementary school, both of which feed the grid and are completely sustainable. There is no plastic in either one of those buildings. It's all wooden and completely sustainable. There's a joke going around Vancouver that we have the elementary school children pedaling in the back rooms, but I assure you that is not the case. They really are sustainable buildings where even the rainwater is collected and recycled for use. So if you want to see a sustainable city in action, you will be subject to a treat if you visit Vancouver, visit Simon Fraser University, the Burnaby campus. It's noteworthy that Simon Fraser University was just selected in the THE impact rankings as #1 in the world for sustainable cities. And I'm very proud to have been a small part of that initiative, but a shining example of what's possible if we all work together and invest resources. I would be remiss if I told you that this happened without a conscious dedication of resources to that initiative. How is it possible to achieve things like no poverty when there's such an enormous gap to overcome? You know, I wring my hands at times when I ask this question, because if you look at the number of very powerful and very rich individuals in the world, and you look at this gap, uh, it really is striking. It's very disheartening, and the best we can do, I think, is to educate people as to their social responsibility. This is going to be key as we get more people involved in taking care of each other. This, I think, is paramount. We have lost our way as a consumer society, and we have to return to what's important. Significantly, I think the COVID-19 crisis has helped focus efforts as to what is important. And you see people giving of their time, giving freely of themselves and their resources to help others. And I think this is an important first step. We have a long way to go. The gap is enormous. It's a chasm. But it's with education and with demonstration. We have to walk the talk, and we have to pass that message along and get as many people on board so that we do address this gap. This is, along with food insecurity, is one of the most difficult, I think, to overcome. In my previous work, I worked in the slums in Mumbai, India. There are 6 million people living in those slums with an entire hierarchy of bureaucracy, some corrupt, but nonetheless 6 million people living in that slum. And as soon as you see that, it slaps you in the face, because you realize that not everyone is equal. And people like to say the COVID-19 crisis was the great equalizer, that no one was immune. It was not. It was not, because the poor were selectively impacted. And if there's any doubt about that, you just have to look at the stats across the world. The next slide, Delvin Langdon at the Eco Center had organized some training with the UN around the SDGs. COVID interrupted this. Not sure when it might be rescheduled. Good point. I think we'll be getting back to normal if all goes well. In Queensland, a few new cases today, disturbing, but we're hoping that we will get back to normal. Of course, we've gone to a very new modality. We're all now familiar with working online, working through Teams. And I think we've got to start adopting this as the new normal and just launch our initiatives, our fora, seminars, and so on, so that we don't be held hostage to COVID-19. We know how to manage this now, as I am doing now, online. Rob has contributed as a discussion point for engagement and accountability. I think the development of the plan, which is up for renewal, can be a point of engagement for SDGs. So with that in mind, once again, feel free to reach out to Rob and me. We're always available online. Please shoot me an email. My email is very simple, dvcr@Griffith, etc. So please feel free to get involved, and we will do our best to direct you to the appropriate groups. Next question, does Griffith work with other universities to implement the SDGs? Very good point. We're not in this alone. We are not in this alone. This has to be a concerted effort. And I can tell you that as a member of the DVCR executive of the Universities of Australia, as a member of the DVCR group of the Queensland universities, I've been very active in reaching out to my colleagues to ask them about their best practices and how they are going and how they are traveling with their various initiatives. So yes, we will not work in isolation. And if you recall my slide with the cutlery being put together in a very imaginative way to form that chopper, that motorcycle, that really is the winning formula. Collaboration is the way to do this. So Yes, we will work together. We may each choose different SDGs to highlight for our rankings, depending on our particular strengths, but we will definitely work together. Uh, we are one here, and I think the more we understand that, the better, and the better chance we have at achieving some of those 17 SDGs. Melbourne Uni has a great program called Green Impact. Does Griffith have something like this? We will take this under advisement. I don't think, Rob, we have such an effort underway at that scale, but Rob points out that the Eco Center has a fantastic SDG game and is planning to do more events. Stay tuned. I think we can always do more in answer to the point made about the Melbourne Uni program. But you know, it's important to learn from others. We're not in this alone, and so we will be casting our eye and casting our net widely. Which SDGs will Griffith apply for in the rankings in 2022? Very good question, and I like your forward thinking here. I think the SDG on education, I think, lends itself to investment by Griffith. By then, I think we will be able to make a much stronger pitch for climate action as we gain traction in the Beacon proposal led by Brendan Mackey and his team. So I would say those two going forward. And Rob is helping me out again with another comment, saying that the Griffith Center for Sustainable Enterprise and the Eco Center had joined with Global Impact, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and Banksia Foundation to host a conference this year, but that was delayed due to COVID-19. We have not forgotten about this event, Rob points out, and in line with my comments earlier, I think it's time we launch these initiatives online through Teams meetings. So great springboard for many things at Griffith, and thank you, Rob, for that. How much of an impact do you expect working from home has had during COVID? Do you see this as part of a large shift across the planet? Mixed impact, I would say, because you might have thought that we would have seen a drastic reduction in our energy consumption on the campuses, but that in fact has not come to fruition because of the need to keep our buildings alive, so to speak, so that one had to provide critical services to counteract effects of humidity, etc. So I think overall the results are incompletely, because obviously we have to look at the other component, the other part. What was the energy consumption working from home, right? This is not a zero-sum game. So I think work in progress, Patty. We will have to gather more data and get information on the other side of the coin here. What was the energy consumption at home, and what was the burden of working from home on the sustainability agenda? Anonymous UQ is co-hosting a sustainability symposium, Lessons from Australia and Latin America in actioning the UN SDGs. It would be great to see Griffith do something similar with key international partners. Certainly a very important suggestion here. And again, I see no reason why we cannot engage in such activities. We have held one international meeting already, and I spoke at that, hosted by Vietnam, and we should do more of that. You're absolutely right. What are some of Griffith's partnerships for the goals? Again, I will let Rob speak to the details of that. In my mind, the other Queensland universities, that's who I've been dealing with most closely and most recently, I've been here for 6 months now, and I've been immersed in this activity. I think we've already spoken to the impact of COVID on the progress of the SDGs, and it slowed us down, but I think it's time to mobilize our forces again and to get back on track. And the second part of the question, how can the SDGs help us to recover from COVID? Interesting. I think, as I said, COVID has provided an impetus for us to readjust our baselines and to readjust what we hold as being important and valuable. And I think that is a very important step in the sea change that's going to be required. So indirectly, COVID has helped the SDGs because we are now looking out for one another. And if you come back to the overarching goal of the UN, no one left behind, I think it certainly helped us focus our efforts. But I think you can drive the agenda, as you suggest, from the other direction, using the SDGs to bring forward best practices, to highlight, for example, social justice, to highlight best practices that can help with dealing with some of the issues that have resulted from COVID-19 practices. So the whole issue of isolation has brought to the fore some issues that we suspected would arise, mental health issues of all types, domestic violence issues of different types, with children, with partners, sexual violence, issues of criminal behavior, which we expected to see. And so this has all come about because of imposition of new behavioral norms on people and not necessarily contemplated. And so this, I think, has, again, forced us to use some of the knowledge we've gained from the SDGs to apply them to recovery from COVID practices. So just keeping in mind that social justice SDG and no one left behind and taking care of each other, I think will be very useful going forward as we deal with COVID-19 crisis and its fallout. Tracy suggests that also Campus Life have talked about recycling our own campus waste. Can you expand on that? Certainly, we're cognizant of what we have to do here, and there is some progress, but again, we can do a lot more, Tracy. Do you think it's possible to reach the 17 goals by 2030? I think that's being very optimistic for the reasons I stated before. I think we can get a good start on the 17 goals. I think we can make progress on several of them, but many things have to change. And one cannot count on, one cannot anticipate or predict some of the unusual events. For example, COVID-19, which certainly put a cramp in and a stop to some of our activities. So I think it's going to be difficult, given natural disasters, given unnatural disasters, and the geopolitical events, to guarantee us reaching those 17 goals. But I expect that we will make a very good start, and we will reach some of them by 2030. Realistically, I would say 2050 is probably a better target. Thanks for all the fantastic questions today. As the moderator, for any further information, please email us at sustainability@griffith.edu.au and join us for the rest of the webinars this week. Thank you, Rebecca. Does that mean there's a hook coming? But if not, Brian Adams says the Center for Interfaith and Cultural Dialogue has been working since 2016 to strengthen G20 engagement with the SDGs. Happy to contribute to our experience, insight, and networks. Thank you, Brian, much appreciated. And Rob, reusing SDGs to building back better the STSN, that's the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. There is a 5-point plan, and Rob has directed us to a website. I think we have exhausted all the questions. Is there anything else? If not, let me just thank you for the stimulating questions and for participating in this event. I think we have to work together, and I'll return to that in my closing comments. This is important. So when we say no one left behind, I think that means each and every one of us, each and every one of you. So please reach out to us, and let's make this work. Let's make it happen, and let's walk the talk. Thank you very much, and have a great day, and enjoy the rest of Sustainability Week. Thank you.